Ambassador Oran had spent 40 years serving the hegemony. He had walked on 100 worlds. He had spoken with beings of crystal and beings of flame. He had seen wonders that would break lesser minds, but nothing had prepared him for what he found in the dust of the Grand Archive. The station called Eternity's Reach floated in the empty space between three great empires. It belonged to no one and everyone. Here, the Galactic Conquered kept its memories. Every species that joined the Conquered sent their histories, their records, their stories to this place. The archive held knowledge stretching back 10,000 years. Oran had come here for a simple reason. The hegemony was fighting a trade war with the collective, and he needed old treaties to prove his case. It should have been boring work. It should have taken 3 days. Instead, it changed everything. The archive was a vast sphere, and inside it floated millions of data crystals. Each crystal held the memories of a civilization. Oran moved through the floating maze, his long gray fingers touching crystals as he searched. There were tall beings, with skin like smooth stone and eyes that glowed soft blue. They lived for centuries and valued patience above all things. On the 3rd day of his search, Oran found a crystal that was not in the catalog. It floated in a forgotten corner, covered in dust that had somehow gathered even in the zero gravity. The crystal was old, very old. It held records from a species that had joined the Conquered before they even reached the stars. Oran touched the crystal and let its memories flow into his mind. At first there was nothing unusual: trade agreements, border maps, lists of resources, but then he found a single entry that made him stop breathing. They called them the Enduring Ones. According to the ancient record, the Enduring Ones were beings of soft flesh and red blood. They should have been weak. Their bodies had no armor, no natural weapons, no special abilities, but they would not die. They had seen an Enduring One take wounds that would kill any other species. They had watched these beings fight through pain that should have stopped their hearts. They healed from injuries that should have been permanent. The writer had called them impossible. Oran read the entry 3 times, then he searched for more. He found references in the records next. There were insects, a hive species that shared memories across billions of individuals. Their collective mind remembered everything, and their oldest memories spoke of beings they called the Bonded Ones. They could not understand these creatures. The Bonded Ones formed connections with each other that logic. They would die for strangers. They would sacrifice everything for beings they had known for only moments. They formed families not through biology but through choice. They adopted other species into their groups and treated them as their own. They had found this behavior fascinating and terrifying. Oran kept searching. He forgot about the trade war. He forgot about food and sleep. He moved through the archive like a being possessed, pulling crystal after crystal from the floating collection. They had records too. They called these beings the Madness Walkers. They were creatures of living crystal, sensitive to vibration and energy. They found most environments painful, but the Madness Walkers thrived in places that would destroy other minds. They lived on worlds of poison. They worked in the vacuum of space. They walked through fire and radiation and came out the other side laughing. They had observed them from a distance and decided they were too dangerous to approach. Every species had a different name for them. Every record described them differently, but certain details appeared again and again. Soft flesh, red blood, 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes, endurance beyond reason, emotional bonds beyond understanding, a refusal to accept limits. And one more thing appeared in every record. They were called humans, or Terrans, or Earthborn. Oran had never heard these words before. He brought his findings to the archive's keeper, a being named. Was one of the oldest in the Conquered. Her crystalline body had grown so large over the centuries that she could no longer move. She simply floated in the center of the archive, her mind connected to every data crystal. "You have found the human records," said. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "What are they?" Oran asked. "I have never heard of this species. They are not in any current catalog. They have no seat in the Concord. Where are they?" Was silent for a long moment. "They are nowhere, Ambassador. They do not exist. They never existed." "But the records?" "The records are fragments, myths, stories that ancient species told to explain things they did not understand." Crystals flickered with something that might have been amusement. "Every old civilization has legends of impossible beings. The humans are simply the most common legend. Scholars believe that many species in their early spacefaring years created stories of a perfect species, a species that could do what they could not. Over time, these stories merged and became the human myth." Oran felt something cold in his stomach. "You are saying they were invented." "I am saying no human has ever been found. No human remains have ever been discovered. No human ships have ever been recovered. The records you found are 3,000 years old and they stopped suddenly. If humans were real, where did they go? Where are their descendants? Where is their empire?" The ambassador had no answer. "The Conquered investigated this matter thoroughly many centuries ago," continued. "The conclusion was clear. Humans are a composite myth, a legend created by ancient minds to represent everything they wished they could be, enduring, bonded, free of the limits that bound them. It is a beautiful story, but it is only a story." Oran should have accepted this, was ancient and wise. The Conquered scholars had already answered this question. There was no reason to doubt them. But something felt wrong. He returned to the archive and kept searching. Day after day, he pulled more crystals from the collection. He read records from species that no longer existed. He found fragments of languages that had not been spoken in. And he noticed something that the scholars had dismissed. Every species that claimed direct contact with humans, not just stories, but actual contact, they were gone. Not destroyed, the planets were still there, but the populations had vanished. The who wrote about the enduring ones had lived on a world called Prime. That world was now empty. No remained. The species had simply disappeared from their planet over the span of a few centuries. The hive that remembered the bonded ones had been located on a station near the galactic rim. That station was now a ruin, abandoned for unknown reasons. The who observed the Madness Walkers had been a splinter group, living far from the main collective. They were gone now. Their crystal city stood empty on a dozen moons. Oran made a list. 47 species and civilizations had claimed contact with humans. 47 populations had disappeared without explanation. He brought this finding too. The ancient listened in silence. When Oran finished, she did not speak for a long time. Her crystals dimmed and flickered in patterns he did not recognize. "This was also noted by the scholars," she finally said. "It was considered a coincidence. The galaxy is dangerous. Species disappear all the time. War, plague, disaster, there are many explanations. 47 coincidences. The alternative is impossible." His voice had lost some of its certainty. "You are suggesting that humans were real and that they, what? Destroyed 47 civilizations, took them somewhere." "I am not suggesting anything. I am observing a pattern." Was silent again. When she spoke, her voice was very quiet. "There is one more thing, Ambassador, something that is not in the public records. The deepest archives, the ones that only keepers can access, contain a final entry about humans. It was made by a species called They no longer exist." "What did it say?" Crystals pulsed. "It said, they are leaving. They say something is coming. They say they must prepare. They have asked us to come with them. We have refused. We do not believe their warning, but we are recording this in case we are wrong." Oran felt the cold in his stomach grow. When was this recorded? 3,047 years ago. It is the last record of any species that claimed contact with humans. After this, there is nothing. The humans vanish from history. the vanish with them. What was coming? What were they warning about? They did not say, or if they did, that part of the record was lost. Its form flickered. I have kept this knowledge for 800 years. I have wondered about it often, but I have always returned to the same conclusion. The humans were a myth. The disappearances were coincidence. The record was a mistake or a hoax. Oran nodded slowly. It was the rational conclusion. It was the only conclusion that made sense. But he could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He spent 3 more days in the archive. He read everything he could find about the last years before the humans disappeared. He searched for any clue about what warning they had given. He found nothing useful. Only more fragments, more myths, more stories of impossible beings doing impossible things. On his final day in the archive, Oran was preparing to leave when a young archivist came rushing through the floating crystals. The archivist was a descendant of the same species that had called humans the enduring ones. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "Ambassador," she gasped, "you must come quickly, something is happening." Oran followed her to the archive's command center. Was already there, her ancient form connected to the station's sensors. Other scholars and officials had gathered, all of them staring at a display screen that showed the edge of the galaxy. "What am I looking at?" Oran asked. Answered, 3 hours ago, our deep space sensors detected movement at the galactic rim, in the void between galaxies, where there should be nothing but empty darkness. The screen showed a section of space that Oran had never seen before. It was the absolute edge of the galaxy, where the stars gave way to the infinite black of intergalactic space. Nothing lived there. Nothing could live there. The distances were too vast, the resources too scarce. But something was there now. The sensors showed thousands of signatures. They were emerging from the void like fish rising from the depths of a dark ocean. Ships. Thousands upon thousands of ships. They moved in perfect formation, their designs unlike anything in the Concord's records. "We have attempted contact," said. "All standard frequencies, all known languages. There has been no response." "How many ships?" someone asked. "Current count is approximately 10,000. More are still emerging." The room fell silent. The largest fleet in the Concord's history was perhaps 2,000 vessels. This fleet was 5 times that size, and it was coming from a direction that should have been impossible. Nothing could cross the void between galaxies. The journey would take millions of years. Oran stared at the screen. The ships were beautiful in a strange way, sleek and angular, with lines that flowed like water frozen in motion. They reflected the distant starlight in colors of silver and deep blue. "The design," he said quietly, "it matches nothing in our records." "Nothing," confirmed. "We have searched every database, every historical archive, every fragment of every species that has ever joined the Concorde. These ships do not match any known civilization." But Oran was not so sure. He thought about the records he had spent weeks reading, the stories of impossible beings, the legends of a species that had vanished 3,000 years ago after warning that something was coming. The record had said, "They are leaving. They say something is coming. They say they must prepare." What if they had been preparing all this time? What if they had spent 3,000 years in the void between galaxies, building and waiting? What if the legends were not legends at all? "I need to return to the hegemony," Oran said. "My government must be informed." His crystals flickered with concern. "Ambassador, we do not yet know what this fleet represents. There is no reason to assume." 3,000 years, Oran interrupted. "That is how long the humans have been gone from our records. That is how long ago they warned that something was coming." He pointed at the screen, at the vast fleet still pouring from the void. "I do not know what this is, but I know that the galaxy has believed in a myth for 3,000 years. Perhaps it is time to consider that the myth believed in us." He left the archive that day, carrying with him a weight that he could not name. Behind him, the sensors continued to track the approaching fleet. More ships emerged every hour. The count passed 20,000, then 30. And across the galactic concord, beings of 100 different species looked up at the stars and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. They felt afraid. But mixed with the fear was something else. Something that had lived in the old stories, in the legends passed down through generations, in the myths that scholars had dismissed as fantasy. Hope. Because if the humans were real, if the enduring ones, the bonded ones, the madness walkers were more than stories, then perhaps the galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could imagine. The fleet continued its approach. The void gave up its secrets, and in the darkness between galaxies, lights that had been hidden for 3,000 years finally began to shine. The legends were coming home. Fleet Admiral had commanded the unified conquered navy for 30 years. He had fought in 4 wars, survived 2 assassination attempts, and once held a dying star together long enough for 3 billion civilians to evacuate. His officers said he had ice in his veins and stone in his heart. But as he watched the alien fleet approach the border station Vigilant Dawn, his hands would not stop shaking. "Current count?" he asked. 12,407 vessels, Admiral, his sensor officer replied, still emerging from the void at a rate of approximately 50 per hour. Gripped the railing of his command platform. The Vigilant Dawn was the largest military station on the galactic rim. It housed 50 warships and 20,000 soldiers. It had been built to stop any invasion. It suddenly felt very small. 3 weeks had passed since the archive first detected the fleet. 3 weeks of panic and confusion as the Conquered tried to understand what was happening. Emergency sessions of the Grand Senate had produced nothing but arguments. Some demanded immediate attack. Others called for surrender. Most simply did not know what to do. No one attacked, no one surrendered, everyone waited. And now the waiting was over. "The fleet is slowing," the sensor officer announced. "They are taking up position approximately 10,000 kilometers from the station. They are not moving closer." Studied the display. The alien ships hung in space like a wall of silver and blue. Up close, they were even more beautiful than the long-range images had suggested. Their hulls seemed to flow, as if the metal itself was alive. Lights pulsed along their surfaces in patterns that might have been language or art or something else entirely. "Continue broadcasting first contact protocols," ordered. "All frequencies, all languages." They had been broadcasting for weeks. There had been no response. But this time something changed. "Admiral," the communications officer's voice cracked with excitement, "we are receiving a transmission." The bridge fell silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and turned toward the main display. "Put it through," said. Static filled the speakers for a moment. Then a voice emerged from the noise. It spoke in a language that the translation system struggled to understand. The words were ancient, a dialect that had not been used in thousands of years. But the computers worked hard, and slowly the meaning became clear. "Children of the cradle worlds, we have returned. Do not be afraid." The message repeated 3 times, then stopped. Realized he had stopped breathing. He forced himself to inhale. "Analysis?" he asked. His linguistics officer was staring at her screen. "Admiral, the language base is related to 17 different conquered languages. It appears to be a root form, something that predates current communication standards by at least 3,000 years. 3,000 years, the same number that kept appearing, the same gap in history that Ambassador Oran had reported from the archive. "Do not be afraid," the communications officer repeated softly. "What does that mean?" No one had an answer. For 6 hours, nothing happened. The alien fleet held its position. The Vigilant Dawn maintained combat readiness. Messages flew between the border and the core worlds as governments debated what to do. Then a single ship detached from the alien formation. It was smaller than the others, perhaps the size of a Concorde shuttle. It moved slowly, making no threatening gestures. It approached the station with what could only be described as patience. "Orders, Admiral," his tactical officer asked. Considered his options. He could destroy the approaching vessel, he could try to capture it, he could run. He did none of these things. "Clear docking bay 7, he said. "Let them come." The shuttle entered the station's docking bay with perfect precision, watched through security cameras as the small vessel settled onto the deck. Its hull was smooth and seamless, with no visible weapons or engines. It looked more like a work of art than a machine of war. For several minutes nothing happened. Then a section of the hull seemed to melt away, forming an opening. 3 figures emerged. Had seen many species in his long career. He had met beings of crystal and fire, of gas and liquid, of light and shadow, but he had never seen anything like this. They were soft, that was his first thought. Their bodies had no armor, no natural protection of any kind. Their skin was exposed in shades of brown ranging from light to dark. They walked on 2 legs, balanced on 2 feet, with 2 arms hanging at their sides. Their faces had 2 eyes, 1 nose, 1 mouth. They looked fragile, they looked weak. But they did not move like weak beings. They walked with a confidence that spoke of power carefully controlled. Their eyes scanned the docking bay with calm attention, missing nothing. Went to meet them personally. He brought a full security team, but he ordered them to keep their weapons holstered. Whatever these beings were, they had not attacked. He would not attack first. The leader of the 3 visitors was a female. At least, assumed she was female. Her hair was gray and cut short. Lines marked her face in patterns that spoke of age and experience. She wore a uniform of dark blue, simple but elegant. She stopped a few meters from, and raised one hand in what appeared to be a greeting. "Admiral," she said. Her voice was warm and steady, and she spoke perfect modern Concord common. "My name is, I am the Director of External Relations for the Terran Diaspora. I have come to speak with you on behalf of humanity." Felt the word hit him like a physical blow. Humanity, the myth species, the legend that scholars had dismissed for centuries. "You are human," he said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears. Director smiled. It was a strange expression, one that had never seen before. It seemed to make her face brighter somehow. "We are human," she confirmed. "We have been gone for a long time, but we have returned." The next hours were the strangest of life. Director and her companions were taken to a conference room. They accepted water and sat in chairs designed for species with completely different bodies. They did not seem uncomfortable. They did not seem anything except calm and patient. "I have many questions," said. "I imagine you do. I will answer as many as I can." "Where have you been? The records say your species disappeared 3,000 years ago." Director nodded slowly. "We did not disappear, Admiral. We left. There is an important difference." "Left? Left to where? There is nothing beyond the galactic rim. The void between galaxies is empty." "It was empty," Director agreed. "We filled it. We built stations and habitats in the darkness. We created a civilization in the space between stars. It took centuries, but time was something we had plenty of." Struggled to comprehend what he was hearing. Why? Why would you abandon the galaxy? Why would you choose to live in the void? The director's expression changed. The smile faded, replaced by something heavier, something sad. "Because we saw what was coming," she said, "and we knew we could not stop it, not as we were. We needed time to prepare, time to grow, time to build the weapons and ships that might give us a chance." "What was coming?" Director looked at for a long moment. Then she turned to one of her companions, who produced a small device. A holographic display activated, showing an image that made blood run cold. It showed the galaxy, but something was wrong with it. A section of the rim was dark, not empty dark, but wrong dark. It looked like a wound in the fabric of space itself, a spreading stain of nothingness. "We call it the Silence," Director said. "It destroyed our original home. Not Earth. Earth was lost long before that, but the worlds we built after. The civilization we created across 1,000 stars. The Silence consumed it all." "What is it?" "We still do not fully understand. It is not a species. It is not a weapon. It is more like a disease, a corruption of reality itself. Where it spreads, matter and energy cease to function properly. Stars go dark. Planets crumble. Life ends not through violence but through a failure of the universe's fundamental laws." Stared at the holographic image. The dark stain seemed to pulse with a terrible rhythm. "This is in our galaxy now. It has been approaching slowly, carefully, spreading from the direction of the galactic core of a dead galaxy far from here. We detected its first signs 3,000 years ago. We knew we could not fight it with the technology we had. We needed time." "So you ran." "We retreated." Director's voice was firm but not defensive. "There is no shame in retreat when you cannot win. We gathered everyone who would come with us, humans and others, and we went to the one place where we could prepare without being consumed." Others leaned forward. "The records show that many species disappeared around the same time humans did, species that claimed contact with you. They chose to join us." The director's smile returned, softer now. "Humanity has always had a gift for forming bonds. We asked our friends to come with us. Many did. They have been our family in the darkness. They helped us build what we have become." Thought about the stories he had read in the briefing documents. The bonded ones. Beings who formed connections across species and would die for strangers. "And now you return," he said. "Why now?" "Because the Silence has reached the galactic rim. In a few years, perhaps less, it will begin to spread across the stars, and we have spent 3,000 years preparing to fight it." Director stood and walked to a window that looked out at the stars. "We could not defeat it alone, Admiral. We knew that from the beginning. But we hoped that if we prepared long enough, if we developed the right weapons and technologies, we might be able to stop it with help. Your help. The help of every species in the conquered. You want an alliance. We want to save the galaxy. An alliance would be useful for that, yes." Stood as well. He walked to stand beside the human leader, looking out at the same stars. The alien fleet was visible in the distance, thousands of ships waiting in perfect formation. "The conquered does not trust easily," he said. "You are strangers. Myths come to life. There will be fear. There will be resistance. We know. Some will want to fight you. Some will accuse you of bringing this threat to us, or of inventing it as an excuse for conquest. We know that too. And yet you came anyway." Director turned to look at him directly. Her eyes were brown, warm, and very old. "Admiral, humanity spent 3,000 years in the cold darkness between galaxies. We watched our birth galaxy from a distance we could never cross. We remembered the stars we had left behind, the species we had known, the worlds we had walked. Every generation of humans was raised on stories of a home we might never see again." She paused and saw something in her eyes that he had seen in the eyes of soldiers before the final battle. "We did not come back to conquer. We did not come back to rule. We came back because this is home. These are our stars, our space, our family. And when the Silence comes, we will stand with you or die trying. That is what humans do. That is what we have always done." Was silent for a long moment. Then he did something he had not done in decades. He reached out and put his hand on Director's shoulder. "I believe you," he said. "I do not know if the conquered will believe you, but I do." Director smiled again. "That is a beginning." They were still standing by the window when the alarms began. Red lights flashed across the station. Warning sounds echoed through the corridors. Ran to the command center with Director following close behind. "Report," he shouted. The sensor officer's face was pale. "Admiral, long-range sensors on the far rim have gone dark. Sector 7 Alpha through 7 Gamma. All stations, all probes, everything just stopped. Malfunction. Unknown. We are attempting to contact backup stations." Turned to Director. Her face had grown very still. "How long?" he asked. "Less time than we hoped," she replied. "Much less time." On the display screen, a section of the galactic map began to change. The stars in Sector 7 were still visible, but something was different about them. They were dimmer. The lights were going out. "It is here," Director said. "The silence has reached your borders." Stared at the darkening stars. For the first time in 30 years of war and command, he felt truly afraid. But standing beside him was a being from legend, a human, a member of a species that had crossed the void between galaxies and returned to fight the impossible. And in that moment, understood something important. The legends had returned, the humans were real, and the battle for the galaxy was about to begin. He straightened his back and turned to his officers. "Contact Concord Command," he ordered. "Tell them the situation has changed. Tell them we have visitors, and tell them that the darkness is coming." The messages flew across the stars. And across the galaxy, beings of 100 different species looked up and wondered what the morning would bring. For some, it would bring fear. For others, it would bring hope. And for humanity, it would bring the chance they had spent 3,000 years waiting for. The chance to prove that legends could fight back. The Grand Senate of the Galactic Concord had not seen chaos like this in 500 years. Representatives from 47 species filled the great chamber on Prime. They shouted at each other in a dozen languages. They waved their appendages, arms, tentacles, wings, pseudopods, in gestures of anger and fear. The noise was so great that the translation systems could not keep up. At the center of the chaos, Ambassador Oran sat in silence and watched the galaxy tear itself apart. "They are invaders," screamed the representative from the hegemony. He was a military commander named, with eyes that burned with suspicion. "They appear from nowhere with a fleet larger than anything we have ever seen, and they expect us to trust them. They are here to conquer us." "They have not fired a single weapon," the response came from the representative, a drone speaker for the great hive mind. "They come with warnings of danger. They come offering alliance. They remember the old stories. The bonded ones were friends to our ancestors." "Stories," spat the word like poison. "Myths and legends. We have no proof that these beings are what they claim to be. They could be any species wearing stolen bodies." "They match every description in the ancient records," Oran said quietly, but his voice was lost in the shouting. The representative had not spoken. The crystalline being simply floated in place, her ancient body catching the light of the chamber. They were the oldest species in the Concord. They rarely involved themselves in politics, but their silence now felt heavy with meaning. "We demand that the alien fleet withdraw," shouted. "If they are truly friendly, they will respect our borders. If they refuse, we will know their true intentions." "And what of the silence?" The drone's voice cut through the noise. "Our sensors confirm what the humans have said. Sector 7 is dark. Stars are dimming. Something is consuming the rim of the galaxy. Will you fight that alone, Commander?" "We do not know that the silence is real. It could be another deception, a trick to make us accept their presence." The argument continued. Oran closed his eyes and listened to the fear beneath the words. These were beings who had never faced a threat they could not understand. They did not know how to react to legends walking among them. He thought about Director, the human leader he had met briefly at the Vigilant Dawn. She had been patient and kind, answering every question with calm honesty. She had not seemed like a conqueror. She had seemed like someone carrying a very heavy weight. The Senate session ended without resolution. The demanded action, the demanded patience, the said nothing at all. And on the rim of the galaxy, the darkness continued to spread. 3 days later, the hegemony made its decision. Commander led a fleet of 60 warships toward the human position. His orders were simple: force the aliens to withdraw or destroy them. The hegemony would not wait for the conquered to make up its mind. Oran received word of the fleet's departure and felt his stomach turn to ice. He immediately contacted Admiral. "They will not listen to me," said through the communication screen. His face looked tired. "I have warned them that attacking the humans would be suicide. Their fleet outnumbers by 200 to 1, but the commander believes they are bluffing. Can you stop them?" "I am not authorized to fire on conquered vessels." Paused. "But I have spoken with Director. She has made an unusual offer." "What offer?" "She has invited conquered observers aboard the human flagship. She wants us to see for ourselves what humanity has become. She says that if we understand them, we will not fear them." Oran did not hesitate. "I will go." The human shuttle was smaller than Oran expected. It held only 6 passengers, a mix of conquered observers from different species. Admiral had come personally. So had a representative of the hive mind, a small drone with multifaceted eyes. Ivana had joined them, a young one, barely 1,000 years old, whose crystals hummed with curiosity. The shuttle lifted from the vigilant dawn and flew toward the human fleet. As they approached, Oran felt his breath catch. The human ships were even more impressive up close. Their hulls seemed to flow like water, constantly shifting in subtle patterns. Lights pulsed along their surfaces in rhythms that felt almost like breathing. Each ship was unique, but they all shared the same sense of purpose, of power held carefully in check. "The flagship Remembrance," Director's voice came through the shuttle's speakers. "Welcome aboard." The Remembrance was the largest ship Oran had ever seen. It dwarfed anything in the conquered fleet, stretching nearly 10 kilometers from bow to stern. But as the shuttle entered its docking bay, Oran noticed something unexpected. The bay was not empty. Hundreds of beings waited to greet them. Oran saw humans, of course, their soft bodies and strange faces turned toward the shuttle with expressions of welcome. But he also saw others, beings he recognized from ancient records, species that had disappeared from the galaxy 3,000 years ago. They were there, tall and graceful, their silver skin reflecting the bay's lights. They stood beside them, their four-armed forms moving with a dancer's elegance. A dozen other species filled the bay, all of them watching the conquered visitors with eyes full of hope. "The lost ones," Admiral whispered. "They survived." Director met them at the base of the shuttle ramp. She wore the same simple uniform as before, but she seemed different here, more relaxed, more at home. "Welcome to the Terran diaspora," she said. "I would like to show you who we really are." The tour lasted hours. Director led them through the great ship, and everywhere they went, they saw wonders. In the medical bay, human doctors worked alongside healers from a dozen species. Oran watched a human surgeon operate on a patient who had suffered a terrible accident. The surgeon worked for 6 hours without rest, her hands steady and precise. When she finally finished, she had saved a life that any conquered doctor would have declared lost. "Humans have redundant organs," Director explained. "Our hearts have backup systems. Our bodies can survive injuries that would kill most species. We heal from wounds that should be permanent. These are not legends, Ambassador. They are simple biology." In the engineering section, human technicians worked in conditions that would kill in minutes. The temperature was extreme. The radiation levels were dangerous, but the humans moved through it without protection, their bodies adapting to the hostile environment. "We evolved on a world of extremes," Director said. "Our ancestors survived ice ages and heat waves, droughts and floods. Our bodies learned to endure. When we reached the stars, we brought that endurance with us." But it was in the residential sections that Oran truly understood. The corridors were filled with families. Human families, yes, but also something more. He saw a human woman walking hand in hand with a child. He saw an elder teaching a group of mixed-species youngsters. He saw a human man carrying a small drone in his arms, speaking to it softly as if it were his own offspring. The species that joined us, Director said, they did not remain separate. They became part of us. We became part of them. Over 3,000 years, we have grown together into something new. You adopted them, Oran said slowly, into your families. We adopted each other, Director smiled. Humans have always had a gift for forming bonds. We love easily and fiercely. When we met other species who were willing to join us, we did not keep them at a distance. We made them family. The drone representative had not spoken for hours. Now it stepped forward, its many eyes fixed on Director. The hive mind remembers, it said. Our ancestors called you the bonded ones. We thought it was metaphor. We did not understand that you meant it literally. We always meant it literally, Director replied. To humans, bonds are everything. We will die for our family. We will cross the void between galaxies for our family, and anyone can become family. All they have to do is choose. Oran felt something shift inside him. For weeks, he had been reading about humans as legends, impossible beings from ancient stories. But standing here, surrounded by families that crossed species boundaries, he realized the truth. Humans were not impossible, they were simply different. Their bodies were strange, their emotions were powerful, and their capacity for connection was beyond anything the conquered had imagined. But they were real, they were here, and they wanted to help. The tour was interrupted by an alarm. Director's face changed instantly, her warm expression replaced by sharp focus. She touched a device on her wrist and spoke rapidly in a language Oran did not understand. When she turned back to the observers, her eyes were grave. The fleet has engaged us, she said. Commander has opened fire. Admiral went pale. Director, I apologize. I told them not to attack. I warned them. I know, Admiral. This is not your fault. Director was already moving toward a transport platform. But I must go to the bridge. You are welcome to accompany me if you wish to see how humanity responds to aggression. They followed her to the Bridge of the Remembrance. The space was vast and circular, with displays covering every surface. Hundreds of humans and other species worked at stations, their movements calm and efficient despite the chaos outside. On the main display, Oran could see the battle. 60 warships had formed a combat formation and were firing everything they had at the nearest human vessels. Missiles and energy beams streaked through space. The attack was brutal and sustained. The human ships did not fire back. Why aren't they responding? Demanded. They have every right to defend themselves. Director took her place at the center of the bridge. They are defending themselves, Admiral. Watch. The human ships began to move. They did not retreat or scatter. Instead, they flowed around the weapons like water around stones. Their movements were impossibly precise, coordinated in ways that the Conquered's best fleet tactics could not match. The weapons hit nothing but empty space. For 10 minutes, Commander's fleet fired at the human vessels. Not a single shot connected. The human ships simply were not there when the weapons arrived. How? The observers' crystals pulsed with astonishment. How do they coordinate so perfectly? 3,000 years of practice, Director said simply. And something more. Our ships are not just machines. They are part of us. They respond to our will as naturally as your body responds to your thoughts. The attack continued for another hour. By the end, Commander's ships had exhausted their ammunition. They hung in space, powerless and confused. They had thrown everything they had at the human fleet and caused no damage at all. Only then did Director give an order. A single human ship approached the flagship. It broadcast a message on all frequencies. Commander, we mean you no harm. We have demonstrated that we could destroy your fleet if we wished. We do not wish. We only ask that you return home and report what you have seen. There is a greater enemy coming. We should not waste lives fighting each other." For a long moment there was no response. Then slowly the fleet began to withdraw. Oran let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. "You could have killed them all," he said to Director. "Why didn't you?" The human leader turned to face him. Her eyes were tired but kind. "Because that is not who we are," she said. "Humanity learned long ago that conquest brings nothing but suffering. We destroyed with our own weapons. We nearly destroyed ourselves. That experience changed us. We became protectors, not conquerors. We became the ones who hold the line so others can survive." She paused and her voice grew heavy. "The silence is coming, Ambassador. It will not show mercy. It will not hold back. When it arrives, every species in this galaxy will need to stand together or die alone. We cannot afford to make enemies of those we came to save." As if in answer to her words, the bridge's alarm sounded again. "Director," an officer reported, "long-range sensors have detected the silence. It has reached the frontier world of. The planet is under attack." Director closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, they burned with determination. "All ships," she commanded, "set course for maximum speed." She turned to the conquered observers. "Now you will see what humanity learned in 3,000 years of preparation. Now you will see why we became legends." The fleet began to move, and Oran felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. The real battle was about to begin. The conquered fleet arrived at first, and what they found broke something inside them. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship and stared at the display in silence. Around him, his officers wept or prayed or simply stood frozen, unable to process what they were seeing. Had been a thriving world. 12 billion had called it home. It had cities that touched the clouds and oceans full of life. It had been beautiful. Now it was dying. The silence was not like anything the conquered had ever faced. It was not a fleet of ships or an army of soldiers. It was a darkness that spread across space like ink through water. Where it passed, reality itself seemed to break down. Watched as the darkness touched the outermost moon of. The moon did not explode or crack. It simply stopped being. One moment it was there, a sphere of rock and ice. The next moment it was gone, replaced by nothing at all. "How do we fight that?" someone whispered. No one answered. The conquered fleet had answered the distress call from with everything they had. 3,000 warships from a dozen species formed a defensive line between the planet and the advancing darkness. They represented the full military might of the Galactic Alliance. They might as well have been children facing a tsunami. "All weapons, open fire," ordered. His voice was steady even though his hearts were pounding. The conquered fleet unleashed its arsenal. Missiles screamed through space. Energy beams cut across the void. Nuclear weapons detonated in brilliant flashes. Every weapon the galaxy had ever invented was thrown at the advancing darkness. Nothing happened. The weapons passed through the silence as if it was not there. They did not damage it. They did not slow it. The darkness continued its advance, patient and unstoppable. "It is not working," said quietly. "Nothing is working." On the display, the silence reached second moon. The moon vanished like the first. The darkness moved closer to the planet itself. "Admiral, we are receiving distress signals from the surface. Billions of civilians are trapped. They have nowhere to go." Closed his eyes. He had faced impossible battles before. He had made peace with the idea of dying in combat, but this was different. This was not a battle. This was an execution. "All ships prepare to." He never finished the order. Light filled the display. Not the light of weapons, but something else. Something that hurt to look at and made his soul want to sing at the same time. The human fleet had arrived. 12,000 ships poured out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. They spread across the space between the conquered fleet and the planet, forming a wall of silver and blue. And then they began to glow. Had never seen anything like it. Energy pulsed along the hulls of the human ships in waves of brilliant white. It looked like the ships themselves were on fire, but it was not a fire that consumed. It was a fire that created. "What are they doing?" he asked. On the communication channel, Director's voice was calm and clear. "We are anchoring reality," she said. "The silence is not a weapon. It is an unmaking. It erases the laws of physics that hold matter together. Our technology does not destroy the silence. It strengthens reality, making it harder to unmake. We cannot stop it forever, but we can slow it. We can hold the line." The first wave of human ships advanced toward the darkness. Their glow intensified, becoming almost too bright to observe. The silence reached the leading ships, and for the first time it stopped. The darkness pushed against the glowing vessels like a river meeting a dam. The human ships shuddered under the pressure. Their lights flickered and dimmed, but they did not vanish. They did not break. They held. "All ships," Director broadcast, "begin evacuation procedures. Get those civilians off the planet. We will give you as much time as we can." Found his voice. "You heard the director. All transports move to evacuation points. Get those people off." The conquered fleet sprang into action. Transport ships raced toward the planet while warships formed defensive formations around them. For the first time since the battle began, there was hope. But the cost was terrible. The human ships at the front line were dying. The silence could not consume them instantly, but it wore them down. Their lights grew dimmer. Their hulls began to crack. One by one they went dark and drifted away, their crews lost to the void. "They are sacrificing themselves," the observer whispered. "They are dying to protect us." Oran watched through the observation display of the ship that had carried him from the remembrance. Tears he did not know he could shed ran down his stone face. A human cruiser at the front of the line was failing. Its glow had nearly faded. The silence pressed against it, and Oran could see the hull beginning to dissolve. Then another human ship moved to take its place. A fresh vessel, fully powered, slid in front of the dying cruiser. It pushed the silence back and created space for the damaged ship to retreat. No hesitation, no calculation of worth. A ship in danger, a ship moving to help. This happened again and again across the battle line. Human vessels rotated constantly, the strong protecting the weak, the fresh replacing the tired. They fought not as individuals but as a single organism, each part willing to die for the whole. "This is what they learned in 3,000 years, Director said over the communication channel. Her voice was tired now, strained by hours of battle. "This is why we became legends, not because we are stronger than others, but because we refuse to abandon each other, because we will stand in front of the darkness for strangers we have never met." The evacuation continued. Transports filled with civilians rose from surface and fled toward safer space. Millions of lives were saved in those desperate hours, then billions. But not everyone could be saved. The silence was slowing, but it was not stopped. Inch by inch, it pushed forward. The human fleet was running out of ships to sacrifice, and the darkness was reaching toward the planet itself. Admiral Director's voice came through his personal channel, private and quiet. "We cannot hold much longer. The planet will be lost." "How many have we saved?" 8 billion, perhaps 9. 4 billion remain on the surface. Felt those numbers like physical wounds. 4 billion lives. He could not imagine a number so large. He could not imagine so many people dying. "What can we do?" "Fight," Director said simply. "Help us hold the line. Every moment we buy is another transport in the sky. Every minute is another million lives." Looked at his fleet. The conquered ships had hung back, unable to harm the silence, unsure of their role. But he saw his officers watching the human sacrifice. He saw the shame and the anger and the desperate need to do something. "All conquered vessels," he ordered, "form up alongside the human fleet. We may not be able to hurt the Silence, but we can protect the transports. We can give our human allies time to rest. We can fight beside them." The conquered fleet moved. Warships that had tried to attack the humans just hours ago now flew beside them. Swarm carriers coordinated their movements with Terran cruisers. Even the ancient, aloof, separate for thousands of years, joined the line. Their crystalline ships resonated with frequencies that somehow strengthened the human reality anchoring technology. Remember," the ancient observer said, speaking for the first time since the battle began. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors refused the human warning. We stayed behind. We thought we knew better. We lost half our civilization to the Silence before we understood our mistake. We will not make that mistake again." The combined fleet fought for 3 more hours. Human ships died. Conquered ships died. The Silence consumed everything it touched. But the evacuation continued. Transport after transport lifted from, carrying survivors to safety. Finally, when the darkness reached the planet's atmosphere, the last transport cleared the gravity well. "All ships withdraw," Director ordered. "We cannot save the world, but we have saved its people." The fleet pulled back and the Silence swallowed whole. 12 billion people had lived on that world. 11 billion had been saved. 1 billion had been lost. Director stood on the bridge of the Remembrance as her damaged ship limped away from the battlefield. Her face was gray with exhaustion, lined with grief, but her eyes still burned. A conquered communication channel opened. An admiral's face appeared on the display. "Director," he said, his voice was rough with emotion, "I have witnessed many things in my life, but I have never seen courage like what your people showed today." "We lost hundreds of ships," Director replied, "thousands of human lives, and we could not save everyone." "You saved 11 billion. Your ships flew into darkness that would have consumed any other fleet. Your people died protecting strangers who had tried to kill them just hours before." Paused. "That is what legends are made of." Director shook her head slowly. "We are not legends, Admiral. We are just people who refuse to give up. That is all we have ever been." She straightened, pushing away the exhaustion through force of will. "This was the first battle, not the last. The Silence will continue to spread. It will consume more worlds, kill more people. We pushed it back today, but it will return." "Then we will push it back again," said. "The conquered fleet will stand with you. After what we saw today, no one will question your intentions. They will assist in refining your reality anchoring technology," the crystalline observer added. "Our frequencies can amplify its effect. Together, we may be able to hold the Silence indefinitely. And the hive mind has already begun reproducing your defensive tactics," the drone said. "1 billion minds are processing the data from this battle. We will find ways to improve our coordination." Director looked at the faces around her, alien faces, strange faces, the faces of beings who had been strangers just days ago. And for the first time since the battle began, she smiled. "Then we have a chance," she said. "Not a guarantee, but a chance. That is more than we had when we left this galaxy 3,000 years ago." She turned to face the display, where the darkness of the Silence still pulsed at the edge of the system. "We came back to fight beside you, not for you. We came back because this galaxy is our home and everyone in it is our family. Today you showed that you feel the same way." Her voice grew stronger. "The Silence took our first home. It will not take this one. We will stand together. We will fight together. And if we have to, we will die together." She raised her hand in a gesture that did not recognize, but he understood its meaning. It was a salute, a greeting between warriors, a promise between friends. He raised his own hand in return. The war for the galaxy had begun, and for the first time in 3,000 years, humanity was not fighting alone. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Ambassador Iran walked through the corridors of Unity Station, the first joint installation built by the new Stellar Alliance. Around him, beings of 100 different species moved with purpose and hope. The sounds of a dozen languages filled the air, translated by devices that had been improved with human technology. Laughter echoed from the common areas, where children of different worlds played together without care. It was everything he had once thought impossible. The station floated at the heart of what had once been conquered space, now Alliance territory. Through the observation windows, Oran could see ships of every design, human cruisers flying beside warships, swarm carriers docking next to crystal vessels. The war against the Silence had not ended, but it had transformed everything it touched. His first stop was the medical wing, where human doctors worked alongside healers from across the galaxy. A surgeon was teaching a group of students humans, and others, a technique that combined human endurance with precision. The results were remarkable. Patients who would have died under old methods now recovered completely. The humans call it cross-pollination, the surgeon explained when Iran asked. They take the best of each species and combine it into something new. It is how they built their civilization in the void. It is how they survived. Oran watched a human nurse tend to a wounded drone. The patient clicked nervously, but the nurse spoke to it in soft tones, her hands gentle despite their strength. After a few minutes, the relaxed and allowed her to work. "How do you do that?" Oran asked the nurse. "How do you calm a patient from a species you have never met before?" The nurse looked at him with curious eyes. "The same way I calm any patient, I listen, I care. It is not complicated, Ambassador. Fear is fear, pain is pain. The shape of the body does not change what the heart feels." He continued his walk. In the engineering section, human technicians worked in conditions that would kill most species. They laughed and joked as they repaired damaged systems, their bodies shrugging off heat and radiation that required full protective suits for others. A young apprentice watched them with wide eyes, trying to understand how anyone could be so casual about danger. "Does it not hurt?" the apprentice asked one of the human engineers. The human shrugged. "A little, but pain goes away. The work stays done. We just push through it." "Why?" The engineer stopped working and looked at the young. Her face softened into something like kindness. "Because someone needs to do the job. Because the station keeps people safe. Because every hour we keep this place running is another hour that families have together, children grow up, friends share meals." She smiled. "Humans have always been good at suffering for things that matter. It is one of the few gifts our evolution gave us." Oran thought about that as he walked on, suffering for things that matter. It was such a strange way to see pain, not as something to avoid but as a price worth paying. His next stop was the residential section. This was where Oran had wanted to come most of all. This was where he would see the truth of what humanity offered the galaxy. The corridors here were different from the rest of the station. They were decorated with art from a dozen worlds. Plants grew in carefully designed gardens, mixing species that had never shared soil before. The air smelled of food from countless cultures, blending into something new and wonderful. And everywhere there were families. A human man walked past with a child on his shoulders. The child was laughing, her silver skin glowing with joy. Behind them came a woman, 4 arms carrying bags of groceries, calling for them to slow down. They looked like any family on any world, happy, busy together. Oran stopped at a small park where children played. He counted at least 12 different species among them, but they did not seem to notice their differences. They chased each other and climbed the play structures and argued over rules to games that had been invented on the spot. A human girl was teaching a drone to throw a ball. A child, small and crystalline, was showing a human boy how to make music with its vibrations. "They do not see the differences," Oran said quietly. A voice answered from beside him. They see them, they just do not think they matter. He turned to find Director standing there. She looked different now than she had a year ago. The weight on her shoulders seemed lighter. The lines on her face had not faded, but they had been joined by new ones, lines of laughter, lines of hope. "Director," he greeted her, "I did not know you were on the station." "I live here now," she said. "The war continues, but it does not need me at the front every day. I decided to spend my remaining years somewhere hopeful." She gestured at the playing children. "This is why we came back, Ambassador, not to fight the silence, although we will fight it until our last breath. We came back to build this. Families that cross the boundaries between species. Children who grow up knowing that everyone is worthy of love. A galaxy where the question is not, what are you? But who do you choose to be?" Oran watched a human boy help a child who had fallen from the play structure. The boy offered his hand without hesitation, and took it without fear. Such a simple gesture, but it meant everything. "My people called you the enduring ones," Oran said slowly. "Other species called you the bonded ones or the madness walkers. We thought these were legends, exaggerations of your abilities. And now I think they were understatements." He turned to face her. "Your bodies endure pain that would break others. Your hearts form bonds that logic cannot explain. You survive in environments that would drive other minds to destruction. But the legends never mention the most important thing." "What is that?" "You make others want to be like you. You inspire the galaxy to be better than it was." Director smiled. It was the same smile he had seen on the nurse's face, on the engineer's face, on the faces of humans throughout the station. Warm and genuine and full of something he could only call love. "We are not special, Ambassador. We are just people who refuse to give up. Every species in this galaxy has the same potential. They just needed someone to show them it was possible." A child ran up to them, a human girl with dark skin and bright eyes. She tugged on Director's sleeve. "Grandmother, come play with us." Director laughed and ruffled the girl's hair. "In a moment, little one, I am speaking with a friend." The girl looked at Oran with no fear, no suspicion. She saw only another person, tall and stone-skinned, who was talking to her grandmother. "Are you a soldier?" she asked. "I was once, now I am a messenger." "Cool." The girl turned and ran back to her friends, completely uninterested in the differences between them. To her, "You are not an alien," Director said. "You are just someone she met at the park. That is how humans see the universe. Everyone we meet is a potential friend, a potential family member. We just have to give them a chance." Oran watched the child rejoin her friends. Among them was a being of the same species as the commander who had tried to destroy the human fleet just 1 year ago. "Commander was executed by the hegemony for his attack on your ships," Oran said. "Many feel shame for what he did." "I know, and many now serve in the combined fleet, fighting beside humans to protect worlds that have never heard of the hegemony." Director shook her head. "Made a mistake. He was afraid and fear made him do something terrible, but his mistake does not define your species. The who stand with us now, they define your species." She paused and her eyes grew distant. "Humanity made many mistakes, Ambassador. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once. Our original Earth was ruined by our own wars and pollution. We killed each other for reasons that seem foolish now, but we learned, we changed, and eventually we became something better." "How long did it take?" "Thousands of years, and we are still learning, we still make mistakes, but we keep trying to be better. That is all anyone can do." The station's communication system chimed, and a message spread through the corridors. The main fleet was preparing for a major offensive against the Silence. All personnel were to report to their stations. Director straightened, and Oran saw the warrior beneath the grandmother. She was old, but she was not weak. She had crossed the void between galaxies and fought battles that would echo through history. and she was not done yet. "Will you join us, Ambassador?" she asked. "The fleet could use observers, and I think you would like to see what we are fighting for." Oran did not hesitate. "I will come." The flagship Unity was the pride of the Stellar Alliance. It had been built jointly by human and conquered engineers, combining the best technologies of both civilizations. Its crew came from 20 different species, working together as smoothly as if they had trained together for centuries. In truth, they had trained together for only months, but they had learned fast. Oran stood on the observation deck as the fleet assembled. Thousands of ships from across the galaxy gathered in formation. Human cruisers flew beside destroyers. Swarm carriers coordinated with crystal ships. Scouts worked with transports. It was the largest combined fleet in galactic history. And they were going to war. Director stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by officers of every species. Her granddaughter had been left on the station, safe and loved, playing with friends who shared no species but shared everything that mattered. "Attention all ships," Director broadcast. Her voice was calm and clear, the voice of someone who had spent a lifetime leading others through darkness. "This is Director of the Stellar Alliance. Today, we begin the offensive that will determine the fate of our galaxy." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years. Once, the galaxy thought humans were legends, stories told by ancient species to explain the impossible, and maybe we were legends in a way. Maybe we were the stories that kept hope alive during the darkest nights. Images appeared on every ship's display, images of humans fighting the silence, of families crossing species boundaries, of children playing together without fear. But legends are just stories about people who refused to quit, people who faced the darkness and chose to carry the light, people who failed and got back up, people who broke and healed. The fleet engines hummed as they prepared to jump to the front lines. Today, we write a new story, not the story of humanity alone, but the story of the Stellar Alliance, the story of a galaxy that chose to stand together instead of falling apart, the story of 100 species who looked at each other and saw not strangers but family. Director raised her hand in that gesture Oran had learned to recognize, the human salute, the warrior's greeting, the promise between friends. They thought we were legends, maybe we were, but legends can inspire, legends can teach, and when legends fight side by side with those who believe in them, they can change the universe. Across the fleet, hands and appendages and pseudopods rose in the same gesture. Thousands of beings from 100 worlds, united by purpose and hope and love. "All ships," Director commanded, "jump to the front. It is time to show the silence what the light can do." The fleet leaped into faster-than-light travel, leaving trails of brilliant energy across the stars. They were going to war against an enemy that had consumed galaxies, an enemy that represented the end of all things. But they were not afraid, because they were no longer alone. Oran stood at the observation window and watched the stars blur into lines of light. Beside him, humans and aliens worked together with the ease of old friends. Behind him, Director gave orders with the confidence of one who had seen the worst the universe could offer and refused to bow. The humans had been legends once, stories of impossible beings who did impossible things. Now they were just people, neighbors, friends, family. And somehow, that was even more amazing than the legends had ever been. The fleet burst out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the darkness. The silence waited, vast and patient, ready to consume everything in its path. The Stellar Alliance moved to meet it. Human ships took the front line, their reality-anchoring technology blazing with light. Behind them, conquered vessels added their strength to the formation. Crystals sang harmonies that reinforced the barrier. Drones coordinated attacks with 1,000,000,000 minds working as one. The battle began. It would be long, it would be costly, Many would die before it was over. But as Oran watched the combined fleet push back against the darkness, he knew something with perfect certainty. The legends had come home, the light would not go out, and together, human and alien, young and old, strong and weak, together they would write a new story. A story of hope that crossed the void between stars. A story of family that crossed the boundaries between species. A story of legends that became real and people who became legendary. The war for the galaxy continued. And humanity, no longer myths, no longer alone, carried the light forward into the darkness.